dun 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 dun. Huh. Dun dun dun. Funky fantasy. Dun 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 dun. The bowl. Dun dun dun. Stratus arrows. Dun 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 dun. Bum bum ba dum bum. It's the war of nerds. The fresh air that you take a breath on a beautiful day such as this, where your bearded nerdy hosts have come back to educate you on our nerdy opinions on something very controversial in the book world, because I do think it's controversial, because the opinions are very split when you look out there. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about Way of Kings, written by Brandon Sanderson, narrated by Michael Kramer, and I forget the other one because the narrators are boring to me. Oh, I'm starting throwing punches already. Here's the thing, y'all. I had a conversation with somebody the other day on TikTok, and they're like, wow, you don't like them? They're like the most popular narrators. I'm like, popular doesn't mean they're good. I said it. I'm sorry. Controversial while it may be, I don't really think that they're that great at narrating. Like, there's not a lot of different voices. There's not a lot of just. I like voices when it comes to narration, but that's the audiobook side of things. They're not bad. They're just, I don't know. To me, it was already a slow book as it was, and then I have to struggle through listening to Michael Kramer. Zeth, son Volano, truthless of Shinovar, wore white on the day he was to kill a king.
I
If
love
this is
that
how you're
line.
going to sound, it's a great line. But anyways, I'm done complaining about the narrators. I'm sure I'll get flack from somebody for that one. It's because I am a narrator, so I'm very particular about who I like. Want to know who I like? Luke Daniels, Mark Thompson. Those are my two favorite narrators. Why? Because they're legends.
So before we move on, let's clarify. Alfred, did you audio it or did you actually read it?
I audioed it.
Okay. And then I also listened to the Audible. For me, the narration, yes, not the best, but I was okay with it. I do think, and I don't know if it was the pacing of the book or the pacing of the narrating or them trying to fit the two together. There were a lot of like pauses, but I think those were intentional pauses. So I think it was done for a reason, but it did make it that much slower. So I definitely see where you were coming from, Nathan. It's not as exciting as a lot of the books I've seen performed in a different way. But did you have thoughts on how it was narrated, Alfred?
I actually like the narration.
Okay.
It reminded me of like just classic audio fantasy narration. So I didn't mind it. Like most of the epic fantasy that I've gotten into is audiobook. So it didn't sound out of place. But I've listened to a variety of audiobooks, and there's a good portion of narrators that are just horrible. So I'd put them on the above average, but I could see where they are not everyone's cup of tea.
The the way I look at it is when it comes to an audiobook, everybody has their specific style that they enjoy when they're listening to something. Some people enjoy listening to like full like production. So like Mark Thompson, he narrates the Star Wars audiobooks. And so you actually get the Star Wars music, you get the
Mhm.
Star Wars sound effects, it's like you're watching a Star Wars movie, but inside your head. And like he's engaging, he's energetic. The voices are all different. Like his voice for Thrawn is just like, oh man. And then the same thing with like Luke Daniels. He's narrated over 980 titles on Audible. And his voices, like his just arsenal of voices that he does. So for me, it's not that they're bad narrators, it's just I don't like their style, plain and simple. And so that doesn't help when I'm already feeling like I'm being drugged through the mud with a slow story.
That's fair.
Nicest way I can put it.
I do think
But
like
luckily, uh-huh.
my two favorites. Let's see if I can pull it up really quick. Scott Brick. I just love his voice. I could listen to it nonstop. And there's
And
one
me, right?
other, of course. Tim Gerard Reynolds is pretty good, and there's one other guy. He does the Dan Brown series, Robert Langdon series. I love his voice too. I could listen to them nonstop.
Not Travis
but
Baldry, is it?
no, it's Michael Lang something, Michael something.
Michael Langen? I don't know.
Might be. Like it's similar to Langdon. I don't know. But those are the
Yeah.
two that I really like listening to. But I also
They,
think
yeah.
this may be like I may cut this when I edit it and put this as like bonus features at the end because we've gone way off topic.
That's fine. We're gonna get to the topic. Everybody who's watching this will be like, "Are we gonna go back to topic?"
No,
Yes, we are.
we're discussing
But
all the aspects of it.
this is everything into it. It's how our brains think when we're thinking about this. But I want to get this audio point across though.
Please
The
do.
original Lord of the Rings was narrated by like Joe something or whatever. Some old dude like, "You're listening to Lord of the Rings, written by J.R.R. Tolkien, rated by." I'm like, oh my gosh, you're like Jim Dale bad. Like, oh my
Jesus.
gosh, why is it that you're getting? It's just the names of these people. It's like, congratulations, you have a popular name, so you're gonna go narrate it. It doesn't matter if you're good or not. It's like how they put Wesley Crusher as the narrator for Ready Player One. Like, you can't, anyways. But
I
they
actually
just
like
did the
that.
Lord of the well. We're gonna have an episode where we just talk about narration and all this stuff. But Andy Serkis now narrates the Lord of the Rings books, and he is splendid,
That might have
like
been the one I listened to.
energetic. Yep, fun. Anyways, so Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Now back to your previously scheduled program. This is Audible. So, The Way of Kings, book one of the Stormlight Archives by B. Sanderson. Now I haven't read the whole series. Alfred has, Ryan has not. From what I've gathered from people that I've talked to, is I'm getting a lot of people that agree Way of Kings is the weakest one out of the series. Some people also agree that um, Rhythm of War is like kind of boring and slow, but then I hear others who say it's their favorite. Now, I'm looking forward to Words of Radiance, but that's besides the point. So, Way of Kings, I thought the prologue was interesting with Zeth and taking out Gavilar and all the stuff kind of introducing us to Shard Plate. Um, it's not Shard Plate, but the dagger that he uses.
There's a shard
Shard
blade,
Bearer, Shard
shard.
Blade. Thank you. It doesn't cut the flesh, but it cuts the
Mhm.
soul. That's a Shard Blade. I thought that was really cool. Getting introduced to that in the prologue. And then you're just like, holy crap, the king just got taken out. And you're like hearing all these names dropped in the prologue. Where's the king's? Where's Yasna? Where the Dalinar is over here and blah blah blah. It's like, who are all these people and why do I care? Um, and I'm like, I'm following Zeth because I think Zeth is cool, and I still up to this point think Zeth is cool, and I kind of like wish we had more with Seth. But of course, the cool characters we don't get anything of in book one. We just have to insufferably follow around Shallan, the most insufferable freaking character in the book. And thank God for Kaladin and Bridge 4, because that is the entertaining part of book one. That, some of the stuff surrounding Dalinar and Navani, and I just think it moved too slow. I get the world building and I get the character building, and Brandon Sanderson does a great job with that as usual. It's the pacing that freaking kills me. Um, Anyways, I'll let one of you guys kind of share your opening thoughts.
Ryan?
Um, so Shallan, not my favorite character. I do really like her ability to visualize and reconstruct in an art form anybody or anything she's seen. And obviously it has a purpose throughout the book. So I thought that was a really cool thing. Like a lot of Brandon Sanderson's ideas are amazing in concepts. The shard blades, the shard plate, a lot of that I was very intrigued by. My issues for me, starting off the book, were going through the prologue and probably the first 5 chapters. It was very hard for me to keep up with what was what and who was who. Once I got further into the book, things started coming together, and it was kind of like a puzzle piece that had to fit together for you to start to understand the next piece, to start to understand the next piece, which I don't know if that's his style throughout all of his books, or if that was the purpose of him making the book that way for a certain reason. Um, but it made me not want to stop reading it, but it took me longer to get into the book because of it. So that was my personal issue with that. But like I said, Shallan, not my favorite character. Zeth, I like him. Didn't get to see enough of him in that book for me to really have a huge attachment to him, but I can understand where he's a cool concept. A lot of people, when they have read my book, they always tell me like, "Oh, so and so is a really cool character. I like it." And I'm like, "He's in the book for like 5 minutes. What are you talking about? How did you fall in love with this character?" And I feel like Brandon Sanderson has a lot of those that
Yeah,
even in the
they're
little,
funny.
the short stories, like there's the fisherman and his wife or something. There's the small little story that's like 2 pages long or something like that. And like I wanted to know more about that couple. Like they weren't even a couple. I think one liked the other or something like that. And
You
obviously,
might.
yeah, there's a little nugget that I think is going to be built for later, but
Oh, and by the way, side
uh,
note, Brandon Sanderson, if you're listening to this, we still want to interview you on the podcast. Um, so please don't hate us for
there's gonna
anything we say.
but again, like we'll get to like our ultimate um rating of the book between the three of us, and I think it'll be vastly different between the three of us where we land, but there's no hate. Like we will never take anything away from the accomplishments he's had as a writer or what he does, because everything is always going to be subjective. You're either going to like
Mhm.
someone's work or you're going to not. You're going to like how they go about it or you're not. But I mean, that was my first take with like the first half of the book, and I don't want to go on a rant, so we'll go through and kind of piece together little by little as we go through the book. So Alfred, I mean, your take on the start at least.
So
Oh boy, here we
to
go.
piggyback a little bit off of what you said, Ryan, I did have a friend who told me, and he never read Stormlight. He only read Mistborn, and he said Sanderson is an amazing magic system creator, not so much a storyteller. And I kind of looked at him and was like, "Did you really read? I don't know." But that's just a side note I wanted to add there.
Mhm.
I am in love with this series. For anybody who's followed us and knows, my first like main epic fantasy series that I fell in love with was the Sword of Truth series, and Sanderson follows that vein of Wheel of Time, Sword of Truth. I can't really think of other 15 plus book series that are out there. Uh, those are the two big ones that come to my head, and that's kind of what he's done with this series. And for me, when I say that I like character driven stories, this is what I'm talking about, where you spend 7 chapters in the course of maybe 2 weeks with a character going through their daily routine. And it's the little things that each day bring that add up. So in like each part has Kaladin going through several steps in a short period of time. And it's spending that time with the character that I really appreciate. I'm with you guys, and I think most of the Stormlight Archive fan base despises Shallan. She is very, she's not badly written. The character is just annoying and horrible. Uh,
Yep.
now, uh, that's that. Dalinar is great. I love the characters with the exception of Shallan, although she does get somewhat interesting as the series goes on.
Oh, Yasna,
Uh,
what do I do? I stole the soulcaster from you, but I want back with you. Child.
yeah,
Spoilers.
yeah, that
Oops.
was bad.
Spoiler
That was
alert.
annoying. But Yasna is awesome, and she gets even better.
I love you,
Uh,
Yasna.
but in general, that I these are the kind of stories I look for. These heavy character based stories. Oh, even though it's not really the same style, but Game of Thrones loosely fits into this because of the character portion of it. But it's one of my all time favorite series so far. I can't wait for 5 to come out at the end of the year. Um, Probably very soon when you're listening to this episode. But I I can't really say much else.
Okay.
I guess I will say I love the slowness. I think I kind of alluded to that, but that is an A-okay in my book.
What? You like slow books?
Yeah.
No, couldn't be possible. Really?
I like fast books too.
But
I'm blown.
that plays in a little bit to who we are as authors, because Alfred, you write at a little slower pace, and I
Mhm.
write way more fast-paced books that are very short. And I think Nathan, you're probably in between, more on the fast pace, but in between the two, I'd say.
I'm a fast long style writer, so freaking my books are
Yeah.
longer, but they still move quick.
Mm.
Um, if I really wanted to let them, book one probably could have been 300,000 words if I would have let it be.
Yeah.
But I'm a fast-paced long style writer, so
Yeah.
it has moments where it slows down a little bit and you get time to breathe. But it still moves along my chapters. I think it's probably because I write shorter chapters too. I don't write super long chapters, and that helps with ebb and flow. I think my longest chapter is like 14 or 15 pages. So generally I keep mine between 8 and 12. That's about the happy. And my shortest chapters being anywhere between, you know, 4 and 6 pages. Um,
I've only I didn't read all of it, mostly because I just got bored. But I know it's an amazing series. The Shadow of the Gods and Hunger of the Gods by Gwen. He writes, if I'm not mistaken, more of a fast-paced epic fantasy style. At least that's what I've heard from people, and that's where I could see you, Nathan, where you've got a faster-paced, long style writing along his lines, rather than the Martin or the Sanderson style.
Yeah.
yeah, I would definitely like. It's not like I think my Guardians of Zyderia will probably fit into that realm of longer books, more similar to Sanderson or Martin lengthwise, but they're still going to move quickly. So what I like to do is I like to have shorter chapters. You spend time with more of the characters the same amount of time, but the chapters are shorter, so it feels like it's moving along fast. It's all about the length of a chapter. That's what makes the book feel longer or shorter, is how long or short the chapters are. And it's not just visual thing, but if you're listening and you're listening to a chapter to 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes goes by, and all of a sudden you hear chapter blah blah blah. You're like, "Ooh, this is moving along." But if you're looking at your clock and it's been an hour and 15 minutes, and then 30 minutes later you finally hear chapter 2, and you're like, "Oh my gosh, is this how it's going to be the entire what you looking at like that for, Alfred?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Huh?"
So we'll go with, we've already talked about narration. If we could give it a 1 out of 5, we'll go round table for the narration. Each of us give us a score, and we'll kind of add up the scores for like 5 topics for this book, and then kind of get what our totals are for it. So go ahead,
You're
Alfred.
gonna take notes?
Yep.
You're gonna take notes on this? All right.
Yeah. So for narration,
Uh,
go ahead, Alfred.
I'd say the narration is a 4.
Okay.
All right, that's narration. Tone.
Well, we'll go through the whole
At the top. So
episode. We'll touch on that. So first two, since we talked about
Okay.
pacing and narration. So go ahead and give me your score for narration, Nathan. You can be as brutal or however you want. It's your opinion.
It's about the same as what I thought the story was, 3, and maybe things change as the story goes along. Granted, I haven't listened to Kramer and what's the chick's name? What's the woman's name?
We'll look it up, but I
Yeah,
honestly,
whatever.
off the top of
Anyways,
my head, I don't know.
I think it was because the pacing of the story, and honestly, maybe if I go back and listen to it again at a faster pace on Audible and pick the speed up, because I didn't pick the speed up on Audible until like so many chapters in. I think I should have started it at a faster listening speed, and I would have probably been better. So for now, I'm going to say for the narration, um, 3.5, because it was the male narrator got better towards the end
Okay.
as the
Uh,
book went on. I just don't like female narrators. as in general. So it's nothing against them doing a good job. I just can't subjectively give my opinion about that because I find it insufferable to listen to female narrators. Period. I always like male narrators. So, but her voice was pleasant. So as female narrators go, it was pleasant to listen to her voice. So
it was Michael Kramer and Kate Redding.
Kate Redding, there we go.
Yep.
So yeah,
I think
as
they
female
do Wheel of
narrators
Time.
go. What's that?
I believe they do Wheel of Time as well.
They do. That's where most people know them from, actually, is Wheel of Time. And I'm pretty sure Michael Kramer does Mistborn too.
He might.
I'm almost positive that he does. But anyways, so as somebody who doesn't like female narrators, I actually found her voice pretty pleasant, and I thought she did some male voices pretty decently for a woman. But yeah, Michael Kramer was the one. I don't know if it's his cadence or if it's how he goes through the sentences or whatever it is. I just find draggy. But he just talks really slow. So I just think I just need to pick up the listening speed on Audible, and I'll come back again and give a reevaluation score.
There.
So we'll see. So 3.5. Yeah.
Okay. I would go with the 3 as well. Just I haven't listened to a lot of audibles, but I've listened to a wide range of them, and I think a higher performance level would be better for me.
That's fair.
So I'm middle of the pack there. They're about average in my opinion. So a 3. Pacing, since that's what we were kind of talking about with how the story goes. We could talk a little bit more about it, but then what your guys' score would be for like the pacing of the story with Way of Kings as well.
Nathan, you go first on this one.
So I'm gonna pull up Kindle here,
Oh
do this
God.
real time, so that I can give my honest. And this is just me being honest. And I really do think I need to listen to the Mistborn series because I think it would be more on my level of pacing. I've heard that Mistborn is much better paced than
Personally,
but this is just Way of Kings though. This is the first book, so I understand there's a lot of groundwork that has to be laid. Well, I have Wizard's First Rule on here too. Terry Goodkind. Anyways,
ooh,
um, that's Mistborn. We're looking for the Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Sorry, folks.
mhm.
Oh, there it is. Dun 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 dun. Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Narrated by Michael Kramer and Kate Redding. Now I can actually do the full thing properly. So, God, you look at how many chapters in this book, it just makes my brain hurt. And of course, at the end, then you get to the end, and the Stormfather's there. Well, I'm not the Stormfather anymore, but it's okay, Dalinar, because of, oh, really cool. Oh, are we at the end of the book? We are, thank you. But not gonna, anyways, we'll get to that. Vala de Hades. Anyways, so I think from prologue, I think the prologue, Brandon Sanderson writes longer prologues, and I'm not really sure about the you kind of had the prelude, which started.
Mhm.
I actually find the prelude kind of interesting too,
Yeah,
quite
I
frankly.
did enjoy that.
It's almost um like an homage to the Wheel of Time because if you read the prologue to the Wheel of Time, very similar openings.
So prelude to the interludes leading up to part 2 was horribly paced. A 1 in my book. It was so unbearably slow and too much information dropped. Now that should be a thing. I understand why it's longer because all of that information has to be dropped. I think some of it could have been dropped more through dialogue versus narrative tone because sometimes I think that can be a bit more entertaining. But I think part 1 was just paced just awful, in my opinion.
There.
Part 2 picks it up a little bit. You start getting more on Kaladin and Bridge 4, which is when I found my peak of interest start to get up there. Dalinar starts to become more of a bigger player, and things happen like that that I enjoyed. So I think part 2 pacing, it's a 3, and then when you get to part 3, I think parts 3 through 5, the pacing is it's pretty much like I said in my review, but it's a 3.5. And once you get to the last like 10% of the book, pacing is a 5. So the last like 15% of the book is a 5 on pacing because you've got the battle going on, you've got the double cross with Sadeas, you've got all the information about Zeth being told to go after Dalinar and everything happening with Kaladin and understanding why he was called Stormblessed. So I do think it's interesting that there's a society of people that have to survive the high storms. And I think that the history behind Shard Blades and Shard Bearers and the Knights Radiance and all that stuff is really interesting. But I think it's just too slow. And I've told both of you guys, I think you could have cut off 400 pages and the point would have been driven across the same, but with much better pacing, quite honestly. And some of this stuff could have been told in book 2 if we're going to be following around Kaladin and Shallan anyways. Like, gosh, Shallan's the character focus in book 2. Sweet Lord have mercy.
I will say
So
this.
overall
So,
pace, yeah.
not to interrupt, but when I had heard that another character was a focus of book 4, and her impact and her overall page count wasn't that much different than any of the previous books. So when it's the focus, don't take that as I'm going to get everything about her. She's just going to get a little bit more, like Kaladin had backstory chapters and flashbacks. That's kind of what you get with Shallan, but that takes her chapters as opposed to, you know what I mean? So you get more backstory on Shallan rather than more pages of Shallan.
As long as it makes her less insufferable, I'm all for it. Um,
Sorry.
I love female characters. All right, anybody listening, don't think it's that I hate female characters. I hate when they're written like a whiny anime character. Okay, and I love anime, as all of you well know.
Alfred has left the
Alfred
building.
leaves the scene. See, you can already. That's how much. Like, she's like Hermione in the audiobook because Jim Dale can't do her voice. It's like, Harry, Harry, no, no, Harry. Like, gosh, she's not Gilderoy Lockhart. Gilderoy Lockhart, winner of Witches Weekly Smile Contest 5 years in a row. We don't talk about that, do we? Do we?
So
anyways,
overall,
3.5 for the pacing overall. I think if the pacing would have picked up sooner, like around part 2, I would have been so much more enthralled. But I am going to go back and listen to book 1 again, I think, at a faster listening speed after I'm done with the series to see if I have a new outlook on it. Or if I finish the first 4 books before book 5 comes out. Then I'll go back and listen to Way of Kings again. But I'm going to jump into Words of Radiance just to kind of, I don't want to put myself through Way of Kings again right now while I have a bit of a sour attitude about it, because that's not going to be fair to the book. I'm not going to be going through it objectively. I'm going to be going through it opinionated as how I feel right now. So anyways, that's my overall pacing, at least how I feel having just finished it. It's a 3.5.
okay. Alfred, do you want to go? Or you want me to go?
I'll go. I think we kind of guessed what I'm going to say. Pacing is a 5 for me.
Okay.
For all the reasons that I said. I do disagree that I think if you took 400 pages out, you wouldn't get the same emotional impact you get. Maybe not necessarily in book 1, but as the story goes on, you remember all those things and you're like, oh man. At least I did.
That's fair. That's fair. It's what we were talking about with the payoff. Ryan and I were talking about this, and I was talking about with your book too, Alfred. I was just like, first part of the book, I'm just like, oh, slow, here we go. But then the last third of the book, I'm like, oh, holy crap, payoff, here it is. We didn't get that in Way of Kings. We didn't get the payoff, and that's what was so aggravating. I'm like, you got to give us something. Like, Brandon Sanderson fanatics are going to go to the next one no matter what. But for somebody who is just discovering Brandon Sanderson's books, like, I need more of a payoff at the end of the first book. Like, the Stormfather coming back is not enough.
That's fair.
Sadeas's double cross was predictable. I mean, I expected that to happen. So for me, that's not a payoff. A payoff would have been Seth showing up at the end of the book and like having a duel off with Dalinar and some crap going down. That would have been a payoff to me. Or something even more emotional with Kaladin, with a fight to where he like I, I don't know. Like I said, we'll see when book two. Uh, yeah. Anyways, Ryan.
I do want to say that
Oh,
Go
just to
ahead.
tie in a little bit of mine again, sorry. It does take a talented author to do what Sanderson did as far as the multi POV and how quick you get all those multi POVs.
Hmm.
I think all of us have read or listened to a book where there's like 7 POVs in the first 5 chapters, and you're like, I don't know, kind of like you were saying, Nathan, where there's so many names thrown at you, and you were like, I need to actually get into it. I think that was Nathan, or it might have been Ryan. One of you two said it, where
both
you
of
were like,
us.
there was so many, yeah, where there were so many names thrown at you right away, and you were like, all right, it took me a little bit to remember where I was, and you went with that. With a lesser talented author, I normally get like kicked out of a book because I'm like, I don't know who this is. I haven't even experienced this. And I do think that affected the pacing as well, to what you guys are saying, making it much slower, because it wasn't just the story was moving forwards. You were getting basically origin stories for every single character when they were introduced. So I could see that and I understand that. For me, though, in my enjoyment, it made sense and I actually appreciated that.
Yeah. So
It's
sorry. I was just gonna say that's kind of where I am with the pacing is a lot of that stuff at the very beginning was hard to get into because it was not an info dump necessarily, but a lot thrown at you and some with explanation, some without explanation, and having to piece it together was hard. However, two of the other points we're going to get to later, the story and the character kept me engaged enough to not lose me. And I definitely will give him full credit for that because he kept me wanting to read the book despite how slow it was for me. So
yep.
pacing for me is a 3 over the whole book. And to talk about what Nathan was talking about with the payoffs, for me, there wasn't enough payoff in this book with a lot of setup, but I definitely feel like by the time I got to the end, I was like, the payoff's coming, but not in this book. I can see what he wanted to do, and that a lot of the payoff is in future books. But the one payoff I did see was the entire book. The whole time I'm listening, I was like, what in the world is with these interludes? They make no sense to me whatsoever. They're driving me nuts. They have no correlation. There's no connection the whole time. And you get to the end, and there's one scene, and it all makes sense as to why they were there and their purpose. But it still wasn't a big enough payoff for everything that was being set up in that book for me personally. But that was the only payoff I did get in that book that finally made something connect.
It's like the way I like to describe it is it's like a puzzle.
Mm.
Way of Kings. You're putting together all these pieces to a puzzle, and the interludes are maybe a section of the northwestern quadrant of the puzzle, and the parts 1 through 5 are, sections in the middle, and all of the characters have separate pieces of the puzzle. And at the end, you're still missing about 4 or 5 pieces of the puzzle, and you're just staring at that gaping open spot, like with a bunch of puzzle pieces that don't fit, and you're like, the blank spot. It's bothering me. Why does this puzzle not make sense? Okay, it doesn't bother me. Okay, it bothers me a lot. And you're like, I need more of a payoff. And we were talking about multi POV because I write multi POV. I write 7 or 8 chapter or character POVs per book, and I have to stop myself sometimes and be like, okay, am I dumping too many characters at once? And so I do see where he's coming from with writing multi-character POV, and he doesn't even write as many as like Martin or me or some of the other people who write multi-POV. You've got Shalon, you've got Zeth, and you've got Kaladin
And Dalinar slash
and
Ada.
Dalinar. So you've got like 5 with 2 of them being main, Kaladin and Shalon, and then a
Yeah.
few of them other being like kind of like sporadically spread out. So it's I had connection to. I'm not going to say I had connection to Shalon. There's parts like Ryan said where her ability to draw pictures and stuff was interesting. The Soulcaster stuff with like Yasna, but it was Kaladin that I had my central focus on. The Bridge Force stuff, all the stories from like Rock or Teft or any of the things going on, and the constant high storms, or Sadius coming in the military and being like, "You'll do what I say, or else you'll." And then finally Dalinar coming in and being like, kick rocks, dude. Freaking telling Kaladin and them like, come to my camp, you'll be safe. I was like, I love you, Dalinar. You protected my boy Kaladin. Except in book 2, things are going to go down again anyways. So freaking surrounding Kaladin and Adolin in that arc with the breakout from prison. So it's going to be interesting to see how that. Oh, you're fine, Ryan. It's not even a spoiler. Um, the but the thing for me is like, I just don't know. It's I was interested enough to keep, even though it was slow, and I found myself. I mean, it took me a while to get through it. And again, that could have been due to life as well. It could have been the fact that I was distracted with my own books and work and everything else. And so maybe perhaps if I go back through at a faster listening pace and listen to it with a clear mind and a clear heart. And I was trying to quote a movie, but that didn't quite work out. Anyways, I just don't know. I'm connected
I
to
will say this.
Kaladin. What's that?
I can't listen to them back to back to back, and I don't think I could read them back to back to back. I need like a short thriller or mystery book or a fast paced something in between. And to the point where I've tried listening to like lesser epic fantasies after it, and I'm like, I need a break. I can't ingest this after getting through a Stormlight. And it's not like one of those, oh, I just finished a book, I can't get to another book. It's I can read another book, I have no problem with it. It just can't be another fantasy because I'm so saturated from his work. So I see what you're saying, Nathan, and it may just be that too, uh, because I think I get some of that drawback as well when I finish one of his books.
It was probably why I blasted through you and Ryan's book so quickly, because I was just like, I went from Way of Kings to Ryan's book and was able to like blast through his in a day. I was just like, thank God. I was like, something that I'm not like drawing claws against a freaking chalkboard. And then I went to Alfred's and I kind of digressed a little bit. I was just like, please, no, not again. I was just like, oh, wait, never mind, disregard. I was like, yes.
I'm glad you put
And
Ryan's between mine and his.
maybe that's why I did. I don't know. I needed something fast paced, and I needed something that wasn't going to literally stranglehold me. Um, just to to tease me and hold that carrot in front of the rabbit, just be like, come on, you gotta be quicker than that. Like, don't tempt me.
So
So,
go ahead.
yeah,
Go ahead.
go Ryan. No,
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so Nathan, you like Kaladin. I love Kaladin. I also really enjoy Dalinar and
Same.
Adolin. Even in book 1, I was like, ooh, there's something here. This could be really interesting. Uh, but those are my top 3. Seth is up there, but like you said, you don't get much of him in book 1. Shallan
Yep.
is at the very bottom. Members of Bridge 4 are some of my favorites,
Yep.
and even Yasna. I didn't like her as much in the first book, but I think that's because she was tied with Shallan for so long. Uh, but looking back, she's definitely a fun character to listen to read.
I think Elokar is a whiny little
Mhm.
brat
Mhm.
that has no spine. And I think he's written perfectly to serve the purpose that he serves. The
Mhm.
same thing with Sadius. I think he's an annoying pest, and I can't wait to see him get ground pounded. If it just, so I, like hope. So I was like interesting with like, I find the Parshendi to be quite probably the most interesting race. Like the Alethi Light Eyes and the Dark Eyes are just like, okay, so Kaladin's a Dark Eye. Then you've got the Alethi Light Eyes who are meant to rule. So it's interesting. You have Dalinar and Kaladin now together. Kaladin being a Dark Eye, and then Dalinar being a Light Eye. So it's like, well, this is interesting because they've always been kind of like eternal enemies. And then you have stuff around the Parshendi, which is where Zeth is. And we like, why is it son Villano? And then Rock goes through it talking about cousin, cousin, cousin. And you're like, oh, like with the family tree, like the order of what you're born is what you're destined to be. So, like that's interesting how those little pieces get thrown in there,
Mhm.
and it finally you kind of understand a little more grasp about things that were thrown maybe into the prelude or the. Did we ever find out what a thunderclast is?
I'm
I
blanking.
don't think so.
In the prelude, it talks about Kalak and the whole thunderclast and the monster that the guy was looking at that had claws so long and all this other stuff. Did we ever find out
No,
what?
yes. So no, you don't find out in this book.
Okay, am I remembering the word properly? I might be freaking butchering it. Um,
I
it
don't remember
says
off the top of my head.
Kalak rounded a rocky stone ridge and stumbled to a stop before the body of a dying thunderclast.
Yeah.
The enormous stone beast lay on its side, rib-like protrusions from its chest broken and cracked. Um, the
Maybe it's
monstrosity was
supposed to
vaguely.
be. Maybe it's supposed to be a. Oh, they get the gem hearts from them. Oh my god, the big creatures that are in the caverns and stuff.
Oh,
Is this something
I
that's
don't
tied
think
to the Knight's
so.
Radiance?
Yes, so I think this preludes all of that stuff because that's the setup for where their history, like that's what went away and they walked away at that point. So they talk about how the Knights Radiant disbanded and left and betrayed everybody, but realistically, they were in servitude protecting them. And like that's the setup for that, but you don't get an excessive amount of information about that, from my understanding of it. But I assume that
Yeah,
But
that is explained later on.
yeah,
because
you get a
after
lot more information on that stuff in the
because
following
after
books.
because after the prelude, it's 4,500 years later, and then you get the map of Elhokar
Mhm.
and the surroundings created by His Majesty Gavilar Khalin in circa 1167. And then you get prologue to Kill, which is it's just such a good prologue, really
Mhm.
honestly. Like it's long, but I love long prologues as long
Yeah.
as they serve the purpose of the story. But then when you get through the prologue, and I mean, for those of you who haven't read it, the prologue is long. Um,
I love
so
the
there's
end of it where you don't get the subtlety just yet, but where Gavilar asks Zeth to tell I forget exactly what he says, but tell my family or have them read this or something, and he writes I forget the words that he actually writes, but that whole thing, and then everyone's like, wait a minute, did everybody know Gavilar could write and read? Because that's not okay for men to write and read. And they never know that it was actually Zeth that wrote it the whole time. And it
Yeah.
adds this whole aura of mystery and intrigue and gossip around the court. And I'm like, that's really cool. Just something so subtle like that that most authors would probably be like, all right, I wrote that. No, not a big deal. But Sanderson was able to weave through and keep it going.
and I think I like the parts too where it's just like, you get the 4,500 years later, and then 4,555 years later, which is when chapter one, Kaladin is a kid. And I like the parts that he does. Maybe it's because I do things similar, but it's like, you've killed me, bastards, you've killed me while the sun is still hot. I die. Collected on the fifth day of the week Chach of the month Batab of the year 1171, 10 seconds pre-death. Subject with a dark-eyed soldier, 31 years of age. Sample is considered questionable. Was like, I like that stuff. The beginning chapters where you add those little, because it's the Stormlight archives. So all of this stuff that we're reading, I have a feeling at the end of the series, it's going to be some old crusty war veteran who's like reading these stories to his like child or something. These are all things that have been collected and written in tablets and scribes, and so
But
it's interesting.
that's the payoff I was talking about at the end of the book, though. All those are the one connection you get in the book is that King is experimenting on those people and collects their words before they die. And
Which king is that?
the one that allowed Shallan and why am I blanking on her name? Uh
Yasna? No.
Yasna to be
Yeah.
in his kingdom researching stuff in his library. He acts like a feeble king, but realistically, he's the one controlling Zeth at the end of that book. And am I not wrong?
T, no, you're
Oh,
right. I
is he
think it
Yeah.
the
begins with a T.
He's the one controlling Zeth, and he has Zeth assassinate all these people, and the final name on his list is himself, and that's Zeth coming back to him for him to give him his next set of orders. And that's where Zeth sees him doing these horrific things of killing these people and collecting their last words. And that's what all those interludes are him performing these heinous acts to these people just to collect this information that he's using for whatever purpose that we don't actually get an explanation for yet. So that was the only payoff I actually got in that book, was the understanding of all those interludes, because they annoyed the crap out of me not knowing what they meant the whole book.
All right, hold on.
You've
I'm
been trying to
finding.
say something, Ryan. While Nathan looks for that,
Yeah.
what was it you've been trying to say?
Oh, I was just going to interlude to characters as our next thing, but you guys naturally went into that. So real quick, I'll tell mine while Nathan's looking up at that, because we kind of went into those, and then we can give scores on characters afterwards. But Kaladin by far was my favorite character from the moment. Every time he broke himself down, every time he built himself back up, all of his backstory, there was not one moment of his character that I didn't like the journey he was on. Definitely my favorite. And because of that, Syl was definitely one of my favorite characters because of her connection with him and the fact that she was so unique for who she was and so different from her species, and how they were supposed to act, and her connection with Kaladin. But then also, like, my super B character that wasn't really in it much, Wit. Wit was one of my all-time favorite characters throughout the entire book. Every scene he was in, his name suited the scene, and it was on point with his dialogue. But yeah,
oh my gosh, my whole brain is changed now. I don't know how I missed that. King Taravangian was he's the wow. Okay, my opinion about the book has changed drastically.
which is good. It's good that we had this discussion then. Five for characters though. That is, I max out on characters because I think he nailed even the ones you hate. I think we're good. So
how did I miss that?
And his side characters, like that's the thing too. Like you said, Taravangian, like that's a character you're like, oh my god, when you get that he's been behind it the whole time, killing off his rivals, you're like, oh my god, that's brilliant. Lopin from Bridge 4, one of the characters that come in super late, he's interesting. Moash, Teth, Rock, like Yasna is a side character in book 1. Even the younger brother of Adolin, Renarin.
Yeah.
All of them are just super interesting and you want to know more about. So yeah, I'm with you, Ryan. 5 out of 5 for characters. You good over there, Nathan?
That's the WTF moment my buddy was telling me about that I didn't see.
Yeah.
Now okay, wow. All right. Come on, man. How did I miss that?
And to kind of go back, well, so that's the thing. Like pacing, the amount of story, the amount of words, like it could almost take you out of the story. And if you don't connect that last dot when you're thinking about all these other things going on, it's so easy to to just pass by that and not focus on it. You could just be like, oh, Zeth's gonna go kill somebody else, and that's what you take from that scene. And but that was, like I said, the only payoff I got in that book was understanding what all those little excerpts finally meant. Whereas the rest of the book, I got no payoff for Kaladin's journey, no payoff for Dalinar's journey, no payoff for Yasna or Shallan's journey. Like none of that paid off for me at the ending of the book. It's all like, oh, you'll get to this later. And I was like, you guys are driving me nuts. But then that scene happened and I'm like, okay, all right, I will read the next one.
I do think for me, the payoffs were Dalinar realizing that he can't do what he wanted to do. So the fact that Sadeas turned on him because they can't be changed, I thought that was a payoff. And the payoff was more of uniting, like you guys said, Dalinar and Kaladin, Light Eyes and Dark Eyes uniting in a front. That I was like, okay, so now he's going to start moving towards that. That was what paid off for me, and I was like, all right, I want to read the next book to see where that goes. But yeah, I think the major payoff is that what all those little interludes meant, and then you're like, oh wow, that's great.
Yeah.
So now that I'm not distracted from that epiphany, the characters was 5 definitely. I've always said that Brandon Sanderson is a world building, character building master, and that is, I think, his stories are character driven, not plot driven, in my mind, at least from the way what I'm gathering so far. Which makes sense. Because I'm pretty sure now, anyways. But for me, Kaladin definitely Kaladin and Dalinar were my favorites in book 1. I really liked Seth. Like he wasn't around much, but I still found him to be one of the most interesting characters. And I just kind of I want to know more about him. So in my book, that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
I found Navani interesting, even though she wasn't around very much. I'm interested to see more about her. Yasna's interesting. I don't have enough to be like, I can't wait till I see her again type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Shallan is at the bottom of the list for me. She's insufferable and whiny and annoying. And but there's just a lot of side characters. Like the Bridge 4 crew is like where it's at. Like all those chapters were the most interesting for me. And the characters, like you said, Moash, Test, Rock, all those guys are awesome. And the story of what Kaladin had to deal with watching his bridge crew members die when Sadeas was coming in there and basically just trying to kill them all. And also when Sadeas was trying to basically arrest Kaladin and the rest. He's like, you're going back to slavery. But luckily, Dalinar strolls in later and he's just like, you're going to be part of my camp. Like, I got you. So there's something that's going to happen that's going to separate Dalinar and Kaladin in book 2, because I already know that something's going to lead Kaladin and Adolin to get together. So now that I know about Taravangian, I'm just like, what the heck? Oh, that makes so much more sense. And I'm still mad that I did not piece that. All I got from it was just like, here's some king telling Seth. I'm focused on Seth at that point, telling Seth to go take out Dalinar. I was just like, oh, cool. Didn't even pick up that all the interludes like collected on the day of blah 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 was Taravangian the whole time.
Yeah. But it's
Oh
also
my gosh.
it's subtle. Like he doesn't outright say it. You just kind of pick up on it during it, like because he's in the scene doing it at the same time he's talking to him. But like it's so subtle that if your focus is slightly shifted, it's so easy to miss.
No, I remember him doing it. I just didn't piece it together. Like anybody who's watching this episode, this is raw reaction. So I'm just showing like I'm willing to eat my tongue and my words.
Let's go with magic system, because I think there's a couple in the Stormlight archives. One of them is the shard plate and the shard blades, like summoning the shard blade from somewhere and having 10 heartbeats, and how it's
That's
actually
so cool.
Whether if you're like just calm and cool, it takes longer to summon your shard blade. If you're up and about, it's a much faster rate. Seth's blade is a different shard blade than the others. Then you've got the Spren. You have Kaladin using Stormlight. Like all of that stuff. There's like so many magic systems going on, and the way that they're connected, whether you learn about them in book 1 or the more you learn about them as the series goes on, it's just so fascinating. And why I did bring up what my friend said earlier is that he is a master at creating magic systems, and I love this one because it's so, you can see where it ties into others that he's created, but it's still unique and stands on its own, I think.
I think his magic system is really, really cool. Like I am not somebody who creates hard magic systems. I always create hybrid or soft magic systems because I like exploration and the ability to introduce new things, which is why some authors write that way, hybrid or soft. Brandon Sanderson, though, has a very hard magic system where there is rules and there is consequences and there is a certain way, like the heartbeat thing you were talking about is so cool. Like it's like one of the coolest things. So I mean, 5 for me for the magic system. Uh, kind of wish we got to see Stormlight used more in book 1,
Oh,
except it's
don't
just
worry.
people like, oh, there are people who use it to light their lanterns. Oh, the peasants, they do so. Like,
Except
okay,
Yasna just murks 2 guys in the back alley.
yeah, no
Easily.
kidding. Now the Soulcaster has something to
Uh,
do with Stormlight, doesn't it?
For normal people, yes, but hers did not.
okay, I
Okay,
wasn't sure if that was in book 1 or not.
Yes, it
it
is.
was the Soulcaster stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Because she
has to do with
stole it and
Stormlight.
she's like, it doesn't work. It's because it's fake.
Mhm.
Get screwed. Um, Maybe if you weren't such a whiny, insufferable little brat, then you would have figured that out. But your intelligence is that of monks hiding out in the mountains. So, I'm kidding, but still, like, she is a child essentially compared to Yasna. Yasna's intelligence far exceeds. You would think like she might be witty. She's intelligent to draw pictures and like can steal from Yasna, but like, why would Yasna expect her or even predict that she would try to steal something like conniving little
Mhm.
um word. So yes, I wanted more Stormlight in book 1. That's what I would have liked to have seen. I think surrounding shard blades and shard plates, and especially kind of Dalinar's Oathbringer shard blade. So cool, dude.
Yep.
I'm like, bro, like I'm over here in Kingdom Society writing about like, 6 foot long lightning blades, but I'm just like, I want to see some more shard blades and like that's like some Final Fantasy-esque type stuff. Um,
I'm not even kidding. Like the stuff that happens with the lore in those items is just like, oh my goodness,
Hmm.
it's so amazing.
Yep.
Especially when you like, I can't say because it'll spoil. But
So
yeah, and yeah,
I was gonna say I'd give it a 5 as well. However, there are points where it confused me, and that was where it like slowed down for me with the magic system, is because like it was so intricate that sometimes it was hard to follow without all the pieces being there. So you're just like jumping on faith for a little while until you either get an answer or you just assume, like we talked about previously with Star Wars, like things just happen because things happen. But yet it's a
Mhm.
hard magic system, so there are rules and how it works, but yet I just got lost at times with certain things, especially when uh Shallan first encounters it and she has the
Mhm.
creatures and then she falls through that sea of beads. The sea of beads scene threw me for a loop. Like I really could not follow that scene well visually for what was going on. So
Mhm.
that hurt me, but how well it was built and the amazing things that he was able to create still keeps the magic system as a 5 for me. And
Mhm.
talking about shard blades, my favorite one is the one you see for like a few seconds in the book, and it's the guy Dalinar fights on the plateau in the final scene, who is a Parshendi with a shard blade, and it has like it's like a snaking barbed blade, but like I don't even know the guy's name because I don't know if they mention it in the book or
I
not, but
don't
I
think they
he
do.
plays a part later on, I'm sure, because he there was like a recognition between the two.
Hmm.
So, but
I
yeah,
forget.
I would give it a 5.
Maybe one of the interludes, like the not the before the chapter, but like the actual interludes between the chapters or the parts. I think they're in there
Okay.
in book 1, if I'm not mistaken.
what's the next one
But
on the list, Ryan?
I would say story. That gives us 5 well-rounded um categories that we've rated. So the final one would be story, the overall story for the book. And I'll go first since I haven't gone first yet in any of these categories. But because I didn't get a big enough payoff, and thinking about it now with kind of what Alfred said, um, I think the stories I gravitate towards as a reader and an author are there is a big bad, you challenge big bad, you defeat big bad, there's your payoff. There may be other payoffs throughout the book, there may be character development that pays off, and there was in his story, but it wasn't the type of story I was expecting and the conclusion that I was expecting, which is why I was taken back with not a big enough payoff. But there were very intricate, cool stories within it. I loved Kaladin's story as a character. I loved how you had all these multiple points of view that I never saw coming together specifically in a connection. But halfway through the book, I'm like, I want Dalinar and Kaladin to come together. Now I'm waiting for this moment, and they did. So I get what Alfred was saying there, but there just weren't enough of those for me. But I will still give it a 4 as far as the overall story, because it was very well written. There was a lot of good stories that intermingle through it, and he did make a lot of connection points I didn't see coming. I did not see Sadeas betraying Dalinar. I know there was a lot of setup, but I saw the setup as like a red herring that was taking you away from it. And then when he finally did betray him, that's where I texted you guys while I was reading it. And I was like, are you serious? You had me going the other way. Are you serious that you really did? Like, no. So that was my moment where I was actually thrown off by the story, because I thought it was like, I'm going to lead you down this path. You're expecting it, so I'm not going to do it. But then he did it. So,
Yes, that's a good one.
So for me, I'm not one to retract a lot, but because of the fact that we talked about the Taravangian stuff, and now it kind of just having discussions like this can help, because you don't realize, and like you have other people to tell you. So I had given it a 3-star when I first rated it, but because of the Taravangian stuff, that bumps me up to a 3.5. It still wasn't enough for an overall to be 4, just because of the fact the pacing was the pacing was slow enough with so much stuff that I missed the Taravangian thing. I was so frustrated because of the pacing and because of earlier stuff with Shallan and things being so just, quite frankly, boring, that I missed something so cool like the whole Taravangian thing. And Sadeas double crossing, I expected that to happen. So for me, that wasn't really like I expected it. So I was like, huh, all right. Dalinar's a beast. He'll figure something out.
he didn't know.
If it wasn't not yet.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Well, I meant in the
Okay?
moment he wasn't able to. Someone else actually had
And moment
That
schmoments.
was a
All right.
that the
Moment
fact that
schmoments.
he's just standing there and Kaladin's like, I can't believe I'm about to go save a Light Eyes. What the hell am I doing? Why am I doing this? I was like, yes, Kaladin, do it. Do it. Be a hero.
But continue, Nathan. Yep.
Because of the characters and because of my connection and loving Kaladin as much as I do, Kaladin's my boy. All right. Kaladin's my spirit animal. So like I write a lot of my characters very similarly to Kaladin. So it's probably why I have such a deep connection to him. So if it wasn't for Kaladin and the cool stuff with Dalinar and Zeth showing up at the times that he did, and don't get me wrong, even some of the stuff happening when Shallan was with Yasna around the history and stuff happening in Taravangian's kingdom. Gosh, if you wouldn't have told me about that Taravangian thing, but like I said, to me, it's still a 3.5 for the overall experience, just because I couldn't enjoy or understand the Taravangian thing until now because of how, I don't know. Could have been, like I said, could have been life, could have been stuff, but I'm not going to change really my overall rating that much. But a half a star, it'll bump up.
I think that's fair.
But like I said, it's still, I'm still excited to read the next book, and I think I'll revisit Way of Kings later and listen to it faster, and maybe I'll have a better appreciation for it, and I won't find it as slow because I've had all the other stuff from the other books. And just, different times in life, you can appreciate books in a different way. Life. So yeah, I'll bump it up to a 3.5. If there would have been more payoffs, even with the slow pacing, I would have given it a 4 like Ryan. But because of the minimal payoff and because of the predictability of Sadeas' double cross and the slow pacing, 3.5. But still gazoon tight, still decent. Welcome. This is the silent sneeze attacks. So yeah, I think that's just me being honest. And I'm somebody who likes faster paced reads.
Mhm.
It's the way I write. It's the way I've always liked movies to be. I still like longer movies. I just like longer fast paced movies. Um, I write very similar to an anime or to a comic book superhero movie. So like in Avengers Infinity War was 2 hours and 45 minutes, but it was still fast paced.
Mhm.
It was a longer movie, but it was still fast paced. Same thing with Endgame. So I'm excited to see what happens in Words of Radiance, and we'll see how Sanderson shapes this series. Um, and when I'm done with Way of Kings, I probably should have started with Mistborn, but I didn't.
I haven't
And
read it
I mean,
either.
I've known Sanderson's name for a long time, but I never really I just heard all these people like, yeah, Brandon Sanderson is the best. And so I just finally started looking around. It's just like, let's see what books he's written. Um,
So, side tangent. I loved the
yeah,
first Mistborn. I was not a huge fan of book two and book three. I have not continued the series past that. It's like the first era and the second era. I was like, it doesn't really pique my interest as much. I may eventually read it, but it's not. I'm not like I have to read everything Sanderson has written. Although I did find his very first book, Elantris, very interesting, and he says that's his weakest work, and a lot of people say it's not that good, but I enjoyed it.
it's
But for me, this book is a five for story. I think the story that is in place is uh, open enough where it lends itself for a large series, and the nuggets you get along the way are well placed. And again, because I've read up until the current book, I imagine that's kind of influencing my view on that a little bit with the payoffs. But in general, I love the story. I love the character development and the hurdles they had to overcome along the way. And like the Kaladin being knocked down and then coming back up and then knocked down and coming back up. Like you, Nathan, that's how I write my main character. Anthony is very, I'd say like Kaladin would be like Surge, if anybody remembers that soda from back in the day. And
Yeah, I do.
my character Anthony Luther would be like uh, uh, a regular Coke. Like the Surge was the ultra sugar infused soda, and then a Coke is got sugar, but it's not. So uh, Anthony is like Kaladin Light if I want to boost myself a little bit, but very similar in that. And I love the Kaladin arc. Even Shallan's story was interesting enough. The character wasn't, but the story she went through was interesting. Dalinar, I love the uh, struggle he deals with, where he's got a condition where, and everyone's like, "Oh, hush, hush, we can't talk about it. We have to hide that. He's a noble. He's the great Blackthorn. We can't let him have all this negativity around him." And his struggle with that, plus raising two kids without his wife, a lot of that I really found interesting and engaging. So five for me on story.
absolutely. And so we're gonna do this little War of Nerds thing that we do every once in a while. And Ryan and I are gonna be defending Way of Kings, and you are gonna be trashing it.
All
So,
right.
yep.
All right. All right.
So the first question. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm John Von Jago. Welcome back to the show. Today, we have the bearded nerdy hosts here to do a War of Nerds on the Way of the Kings, book one of the Stormlight Archives by Brandon Sanderson. So, first question is, Alfred, go ahead and tell us why the Way of Kings is awful.
Okay. So, my least favorite part were the interludes. And not the beginning of the paragraph, but like the between the parts where you get all these random side characters, and they were just slowed it down so much. Like I was like, this could be in a separate compendium. You could have Taravangian's journal if you wanted or something. I was just like, this is irritatingly just unnecessary. I also think that the character development is super slow, which is one of my main issues with the Wheel of Time series. I want the character to get to a certain point by the end of the story, and they did not. The actual arcs are book several book or multiple book lengths, not just a single book. I think that Yasna is not Yasna. Shallan is one of the most irritating characters in all of literature. I think she's whiny and annoying, and getting through those chapters are a struggle. I think that uh, Yasna is annoying and stubborn. Even if she is a well-written character, she has an arrogance to her that I don't think is founded necessarily in the first book. Especially when you're from what you're introduced to, like you get her backstory, like she's supposed to be this great scholar, but I don't think you have enough to stand on for her arrogance. Uh, hmm,
Yeah, Shalon would be like if Sakura basically stayed useless throughout all of
yeah,
Naruto and Shippuden. So
I do think that the Statius betrayal was obvious and tropish. Uh,
you can tell this is
that one
hurting
hurt.
him.
That one hurt to say. That one really hurt. Uh, uh, I
Don't strain
think that
yourself, Slick.
I think that some of the backstory with Kaladin was repetitive. I think that several times you get the same conversation between him and his father, and that may be where you could speed it up a little bit. Uh, and it's the constant struggle of I shouldn't fight, I should fight, I shouldn't fight. Uh, that's all I got at the moment.
Well done, sir.
Uh,
So let me grab some Tylenol here. I'm just kidding. So
can I
I
borrow that
thought
when you're
that
done?
the character, the web of character strings that Brandon Sanderson spun in The Way of Kings was brilliant. Um, they're intertwining separate journeys that eventually some connected with each other, like Dalinar and Kaladin, which was probably one of the best parts of the entire book, was seeing the Light Eyes and the Dark Eyes unite, and Kaladin getting to be the hero that he had always wanted to be, but all the while he had been basically a slave on Bridge 4. And having to make all those relationships with his bridge crewmates and forming those bonds and those brotherhoods, like I kind of really honestly Bridge 4 felt like an anime arc for me. Um, just the relationships that were built, the brotherhood, and um, learning bits about backstory through Rock's stories, or eating the stew, because I love stew. No matter what book it's written in, I just love stew. And I love writing about food, so I enjoyed that. Um, and I thought that Yasna, for the time that she was in the book, added some interesting aspects and insight into the history behind a little bit about Gavilar, a little bit about her brother. Um, Dalinar is her brother, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just some of the stuff of kind of just like being almost like a motherly figure to Shallan. So Shallan's like the annoying teenage daughter, whereas Yasna's like, the wise and caring aunt or grandmother who kind of has to guide the little chickling to their destiny. So, oh man, that one's hard to say. So I feel like I feel like I wish I could get a little bit more backstory about what things were like when Gavilar was king. Though I think that might happen in book 2. At least the prologue kind of starts off So I want, I'd like to. I think more about Gavilar would be nice, but I think Dalinar's arc was probably one of the most interesting. Just seeing him transform into the true military general that he's meant to be, and becoming a better leader and standing up for what's right, and literally going to Elokar, his nephew, and putting him in his place, and like threatening to like take him down, making Elokar believe, like, you would kill me, uncle? No, I wouldn't do that. But come on, boy, like have a
That was one
spine.
of my favorites.
Yeah.
It was great because you're just like, Sadis's entire double cross happened only because of Elokar's failure to do his job.
Mhm.
And while Elokar is young, he is a young, inexperienced king, obviously. I appreciated and thought Dalinar trying to be the guiding light for Elokar, but also like showing him like, you should fear me and respect me at the position of authority that I have, and how much I've sacrificed to make sure that you've been able to have an easy kingship, to say the least. So I really love that scene of Dalinar putting Elokar in his place, even though it's family, being willing to bend the lines of almost being morally gray, and like listen here, boy, like Gavilar's gone, you've got shoes to fill, like grow up and do your job. So I really liked that, of just him putting that into perspective. And then just Kaladin's story. I think those were the best parts of the book, and I thought the pacing was what it needed to be. It was wonderfully woven with the
Don't hurt yourself there,
characters
Nathan.
being
I see the veins popping
introduced,
on your.
and it really just those interludes in between parts added so much, really, really well, to add those extra insights to the
Remember, you
story.
decided to do this.
Yeah. So
Okay.
hold on. To take us um back to what Alfred was saying with the character development and not quite being there, or being slow, not enough because it's over the series instead of just the book. I think, and Nathan's gonna hate me for this, Shallan and Kaladin are essentially two of the most like dominant characters in the story as far as like pushing the story along in this book. And obviously in
Yep.
book 2, they're important characters as well. They have the opposite arc from each other, and it's so interconnected, and it's actually brilliant how he does it. Shallan's intrigue to her is she has to do this to save her family, and it comes off as whiny, but it's important enough to her that she's willing to challenge her morals and her character as a shy, sheltered person to go and do this task that could be dangerous, that could be well out of her ability to do so, chooses to do it, and then regrets her choice because of what she's found in a mentorship with Yasna. But on the complete opposite side, Kaladin chooses or wants to be a soldier, grows up really wanting to be that, comes to terms with he wants to be a doctor because of his decisions his dad has made, his dad's moral character, then is forced to be a soldier after he's changed his mind and chosen to be a doctor. So they take the choice out of his hand, whereas Shallan makes the choice to follow through. He doesn't get the choice, it's forced upon him. So he becomes a soldier by necessity, where she chooses to do the act against her character and then has to retract back to herself, whereas Kaladin has to retract back to being a doctor, what he originally chose but was forced against when he's in servitude as a bridgeman. So the fact that he takes those two characters and makes them go on the opposite version of the journey from each other within the same book, but two completely different ways of telling it, I think is masterful. So like, even though Shallan is a boring character, Alfred, I can't believe you would say that about her. Like, she is a very intriguing, fulfilled arc in this book. So I just can't believe you would do that to her, but
100%. Um,
Absolutely.
I will say too, I think it's brilliant how the dark-eyed bridgemen are basically like there's soldiers are slaves. Like
Mhm.
so being a soldier is slavery if you're a dark eye. So
Mhm.
I think that was that leading up to Dalinar, like Elhokar can't do his job, so I'm going to do it for him. I'm going to unite the two forces against the Parshendi, and we're going to put an end to all this foolishness and unite our people, all the people of what the heck is the name of the land again?
Roshar.
Rashar. Thank you. So I thought that was a brilliant string interwoven as just like you said with Kaladin, he wanted to be a doctor, but now he's a slave and he's a
Mhm.
dark-eyed soldier that's forced in indentured servitude essentially. And without Dalinar, he'd still be on the bridge, losing his brothers left and right to high storms or to Sadeas' soldiers. It could have continued going on like that.
I love how Sanderson, which I know we're still in the War of Nerds, so I shouldn't be saying this, but if I were to side with you guys and agree, I would say that I love how Sanderson is able to create an image, not necessarily a caricature, but just an image of a character. And then as the story goes along, you learn more, and the image starts to shatter and break. And if they're like held up as this penultimate good guy, and it shatters and breaks, and you see that they're a crooked SOB, you're like, wow. Or if they're a crooked SOB and all of a sudden it cracks and shatters, there's a little bit of a heart of gold in that one. That's interesting. I love how he takes them and through story and backstory and actions makes these characters human. And that's something I think is very powerful in his writing.
I think and that's the end of the War of Nerds segment of the War of Nerds. But on a real note though, I do believe that this book speaks to if this fantasy book speaks closer to like the darkness of reality of what we deal with in a regular day, like corruption in higher government and military, regular average everyday people making decisions on what they're going to do with their lives or their paths and like how we fight against each other, whether it's, your different race or a different religion or a different political belief. And these are things that Sanderson kind of weaves into the story of the dark eyes and the light eyes and the magic system and the military and the kings and everything else. So I kind of appreciate the political drama side of things with all the people that are in Rashar. And it's like just hits a little bit closer to home emotionally when you're connecting to the characters, when you feel like I could be living a life like that.
Mhm.
Like I could believe that this would be a close um reality to like what it would be like if this was like
Well, if you think about it
us.
too, Dalinar is trying to impart a book viewed as crazy ravings of a madman onto his society. And you can, I mean, depending on anybody's religious belief, you could take any religious text and categorize it as ravings of a madman and trying to put it on a society. And
Yep.
in the context of the story, you kind of don't know if it's legit or not. And he's still like so devout in that belief, regardless of what else is going on. And it's an interesting idea when you take someone that highly uh, respected and then they kind of go crazy according to their society.
And it's a full circle turn to season one, episode one, when Ryan was talking about fantasy and what he believes it is, as it has to do with different religions, different races, different species, and all those things being intertwined about what's in a fantasy story and how it kind of relates to real life on if we were living in a fantasy world.
Mhm.
So it's kind of interesting that now we've seen a book that's like as close to like Ryan's description of a fantasy from when we were describing genres.
Yeah.
So um, yeah, it's Way of Kings has its really interesting moments, and it's enough to keep people to want to keep reading. Apart from me thinking it's poorly paced and things I would have wished could have been different, that's why I'm a writer. I can do it with my own story, and it's like But
So I do want to say before we end this, it's a little bit of
yeah,
a fan theory on my part, and it's not necessarily spoilerish, uh, but my main hope is that somehow, and if you read the other books, it's possible-ish, uh, still becomes a real person, or Kaladin transforms into a friend of some sort, and they can get together because I love their relationship, and he's got no love interest as far as I'm aware, and that I would really appreciate if Sanderson somehow made Syl a real life person and she got with Kaladin.
Is this from what you're hoping from where you're at in the series, or referring to book one?
Referring to where I'm at in the series. That's why I said it's minor spoilerish, but just in general.
That's okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen,
Hold on.
yes.
Ooh.
Our final tallies, just so
Oh yes,
before we
yes.
leave.
What is the?
All
I
right.
think I skewed the results.
In 5 categories, so a possible score of 25 with narration, pacing, story, characters, and magic system all included. Alfred, a 24 out of 25. I expect as much though.
Yeah, that's true. I forgot about the
Nathan,
narration part.
a 20.5 out of 25. Higher than I thought you
Okay.
would have ranked this book. And I thought I
Same.
was going to end up between you guys, but I ranked it as a 20 out of 25. But
Oh,
if you average that out, that's 4 out of 5 stars in every category, roughly. And 3 people who, for having some critical thoughts on this book, seem to rather like it, percentage wise. So,
that's interesting. That's
yeah.
very interesting.
But just food for
That's
thought.
interesting.
That was our final ratings.
So only because of the Taravangian thing. So
Otherwise, you two would have been tied, right?
Yeah, we would have been tied. It would have been that 0.5. But I honestly thought I was going to fall in between your guys' thoughts on it. So,
yeah, you probably expected me to be like 1 star, 2 star, 3 star, like
well,
you know.
harsher, yes, but not
Hmm.
necessarily that low. Because we
No,
all
no,
still
no.
appreciated the work for what it was and what he's done,
Yes.
obviously. So, just
100%.
interesting.
And that's
I
the
am
perfect
curious
note
to see
to
what you guys think as the story goes on. So,
Mhm.
as
Oh,
you
yeah.
read more of the books, I'd like to do maybe not necessarily on the podcast, but we could definitely do more of these in the future.
100%. And with our final tallies, ladies and gentlemen, as always, we have been your bearded nerdy hosts, back with another episode. He said as he stroked his beard indignantly. Well, for old school's sake. Do 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 funky fantasy. Do 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 the bola. Do 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 Stratoceros. Da 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 da. It's the war of nerds. See y'all later.